In this video, we're going to cover the best method for assembling your Aeratis Custom PVC shutters. Before we begin, make sure you check the contents of the box. Make sure all the parts and pieces are included and inspect the pieces for damages during shipping. Please note, everything you need to assemble and install this shutter is included in the box. You will need a few tools as well and some construction adhesive to be assembling your custom shutter. First, measure the exact opening height and width of the window. Next, you will have to determine how you'll be mounting the shutters over the window. Different mounting options will dictate the overall height and width of your shutter assembly. In this video, we will be assembling for a surface mount. This is the most common, and the next video in the series will show how to surface mount your Aeratis custom shutters. Let's begin. Grab the shutter's stiles and make sure you line up the bottoms together. You can tell the bottom from the top because the bottom has a large space without mortise holes. Now, measure from the bottom of the shutter towards the top. Typically, surface mount shutters are between 1 inch and 2 inches taller than the actual opening height of the window. Mark the height of the shutters on the top of the stile. Use a speed square to make a mark across both stiles. Next, lay both stiles together and make sure the bottoms line up perfectly. Line the saw blade up with the mark and cut both pairs of stiles all in one cut. This will ensure that both your shutters are exactly the same length. Next, we need to cut the shutter down to fit the width of our opening. Typically, surface mount shutters are 1 1/4 inch wider than the actual opening of the window. Review the sizing chart to check the actual size to cut the rails and louvers. Once you have identified the correct width, mark and cut all top rails, mid rails, and bottom rails in one cut. If it's not possible to cut them all at one time, cutting in pairs will work. You just have to be careful and make sure they are all the same length before you start assembling your new shutters. Now it's time to cut the louver to the right length. It's best to cut them 10 or 12 at a time. Just make sure all the ends are even before you cut them. Also note, the louvers should be 1 inch longer than the rails. It's best practice to cut them 7/8 of an inch longer than your rails, but 1 inch should work. Now that everything is cut, it's time to start assembling. Lay both stiles on a flat, clean surface. Make sure the bottoms and tops are facing the same direction and make sure the mortise holes are facing each other. Now turn one of the stiles so the mortise holes are pointing towards the sky. Next, we'll insert the louvers all the way into the mortise holes. If they're a little tight, you can use a dry bar of soap and it will make them slip in and out easier. Make sure you leave the top 2 mortise holes open. This is where the top rail will be placed. Also, make a mark where you'll place your mid rail and leave 2 mortise holes open as well. Once you have inserted all the louvers, slowly lay the stile on its side so the louvers line up with the holes of the other stile. Slide the stile without the louvers as close as possible to the row of louvers. Gently pull the louver and insert the louvers into the mortise hole. Make sure you only slide it part way into the mortise hole. Be careful not to pull it all the way out of the initial mortise holes. Continue to do this. If it's a little tight, you can rub the end of the louvers with a bar of dry soap. This will allow it to slide in and out easier without affecting the adhesion of the construction glue. Once all louvers are in both stiles, it's best practice to use the clamps. Don't compress the clamps yet. Just put them into place so the louvers don't get pulled out of the stiles when assembling the rails. Put the top, mid, and bottom rails into place. Take a special note at the shape of the rails. Make sure they're inserted correctly. Tighten the clamps. Make sure the rails are flush with the top and the surface of the stiles. Next, take a 3/16 4-inch long drill bit and drill 2 holes per rail evenly spaced. Try to stay at least 1/2 inch away from the edge of the rail. Next, use a boarding bit. Bore out the pre-drilled holes to match the size of the 4.5-inch assembly screws. Now, we need to loosen the clamps and remove each of the rails. Using a recommended urethane-based construction adhesive, put a generous portion on the ends of each of the rails. Replace the rails and then install the screws. Make sure you don't spin out the screws. Countersink the screws 1/4 of an inch. Once all the assembly screws are in place, remove the clamps and clean any glue that has appeared on the surface. Before painting, use an interior or exterior hole filler to fill all the holes from the screws and any other areas that did not seal up completely. If you have any questions, see the complete assembly instructions at Aeratis.com or give us a call at 888-676-2683.